The thing that inspired me, I think, to be a storyteller was my grandmother. She talks incessantly, and she is absolutely one of the most entertaining gossips I've ever met. But she talks about people. It's so horrible to say. She talks so much about people, but in such an entertaining, vibrant, colorful way that it was just as entertaining as watching any television or movie. Also, just lots of boredom, I would say, inspired me, I think, to want to be a storyteller. I spent a lot of time daydreaming or sitting and thinking and creating, I guess, scenarios in my mind that sort of took me apart from where I was when I wasn't feeling maybe stimulated enough.
I was inspired to become a storyteller from a very, very early age. I grew up in Kingston, Jamaica, a small island in the Caribbean, but with a big impact across the cultural landscape of the world. And stories were an ever-present part of my life growing up there.
What inspired me to be a storyteller is growing up in New Orleans, my mom had a friend named Adela the Storyteller. And she would just tell these little short stories about just like being in New Orleans and whatnot. And I think that was one of the first moments where I was like, this is kind of fun. There are different characters, different voices going on. And I would put on little shows in my parents' house. You know, they're all musicians, so I have them play live music, and then I would just improv for hours. And I don't know what I was trying to tell, but I promise you it was entertaining.
Hi, I'm Stephen Williams.
I'm Kelvin Harrison Jr.
My name is Stefani Robinson, and this is the Storytellers Spotlight. I spent a lot of my youth in theater, and I think the thing that really sort of pushed me into writing specifically or storytelling specifically was feeling at an early age the roles for the plays didn't feel like they were quite representative of who I was as a person or my experience, and just feeling at the time really strongly about this idea that if I wanted that to change, or if I wanted to be excited from a purely theatrical or from an actor's perspective, that I would have to be responsible for creating these stories myself. And I gave up acting and then just sort of threw myself fully into writing.
I discovered the story of Chevalier when I opened the inbox on my laptop one day and discovered that the script had been sent to me by Searchlight Pictures. And I started reading and was blown away by the writing. The script was written by an amazing writer, Stefani Robinson, who viewers may be familiar with from shows like What We Do in the Shadows and Atlanta. And she wrote an amazing screenplay about this composer from the mid-1700s France that I had never heard of before. And this composer happened to also be black and also happened to come from a Caribbean island like myself. In his case, he came from Guadeloupe. And something about the commonality of our origins and our life stories spoke to me immediately, and I became infatuated with the idea of bringing the story to the screen.
I, Marie Antoinette, Queen of France, hereby anoint you, Joseph Bologne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges.
So I first heard about the Chevalier de Saint-Georges when I think I was about 15 or 16 years old. My mom had given me a book, and I can't tell you what the book was. It had something to do with people of color in antiquity, or who had, I guess, lived really extraordinary lives, you know, in the 1700s. These sort of unknown, really fascinating stories, things like that. And I read something about Joseph Bologne, and to me, his life felt like a movie. It felt cinematic already.
I learned about Chevalier through the script. I got the script in an email, and I was just blown away by his story and just the way Stefani Robinson wrote that narrative, and in these different parts. It was just chronicling his life in such a poetic way, and there was so much wisdom that was infused in the perspective of Nana and Joseph, and that sense of community and love, and trying to find your purpose and I was really inspired by it personally, because I felt like I was on a similar journey in my craft, and I think I just wanted to be a part of it, to see what I can learn, but also just to give him an opportunity to be heard and to be celebrated the way he deserves to be celebrated. I realized the more I excelled, the less I was alone.
Someone get him a shiny sash or something. Let's make this festive.
Stephen Williams was the perfect director to bring the story to life for many reasons. I'm such a fan of his work, specifically on Watchmen, which I think had just come out at the time and was incredible. It took my breath away, and from a technical perspective was just kind of astonishing. But I think the thing about Stephen was that he really understood the content. Like, he really understood it, obviously, from a cinematic level, but sort of like how Kelvin, I think, approached it really emotionally. I think that's how Stephen approached this film as well. He was incredibly in tune with it emotionally. He understood the character, and I think at times felt like within his own life he had been the character as well. And anecdotally, I think Stephen seemed to really just sort of understand the sorrow, the stress, the happiness, the excitement, sort of everything that Joseph was going through all the time, right? Like this idea that he needed to be excellent as an armor, as a way to protect himself from hurt and from rejection. And I think Stephen knew that instinctively, and for him to approach the material with that understanding sort of already innately in him, that was super important to me.
The show-off who spoiled Mozart's concert.
May I play with you, monsieur?
Well, I hope this won't be embarrassing for you. Who the hell is that?
So it was really important for us to tell a story that acknowledged the fact that people of African ancestry are heterogeneous. They're not a homogeneous group. They're not a monolith. They're as rich and varied and multifaceted as any other group of people. And so it was great to have the opportunity to tell a story about a protagonist who did things that are, and excelled at aspects of creative and athletic endeavor that were kind of outside the common, depiction of what people of African ancestry have been involved in and have excelled at over time. The Chevalier is a name. It's a French word that it's like the equivalent of a knight. And he was made a knight by the King and Queen of France in mid-1700s. His life was incredibly rich. He was a virtuosic violinist, he was a composer of concertos and opera, he was a marksman, an equestrian, a champion fencer. In fact, John Adams, the American president at the time, described him as the most accomplished man in all of Europe. So his life was immensely rich, and we could only do justice to a portion of his life in one movie. And the portion that we chose to concentrate on is that portion that describes his journey to greater self-awareness. When he starts the movie, he has one set of goals, which is, in his case, to ascend to the upper echelon of French society and to be accepted, and he feels like his passport to that level of acceptance is just excellence across the board in every field of endeavor. But when he gets to the top, he realizes that it's much more complicated than he had initially understood it to be. And he comes into a different chapter of his life that is much more about fighting on behalf of democratic principles, self-reliance, and a kind of more just deal for people of his ancestry.
You are playing a dangerous game, friend.
You forget your place, boy. Break his hands.
You could be more influential than you know. Leverage it.
I'm putting on a concert. Let us fund the revolution.
He knew so many languages. He was great at horseback riding. He was a poet. He was a romantic. He was an incredible violinist, an incredible composer, a virtuosic tendencies when he was writing his music. And he just felt cool. Like, I think that's what it was. Like, to me, he just reminded me of Jimi Hendrix or Prince, who I was really, really getting into at the time. And that was the thing that sort of broke my brain open, I think. Like, it really sort of brought classical music into the forefront for me, this idea that, you know, at the time classical music wasn't classical music, it was just music. I feel a lot of things about this idea that Joseph's legacy was erased from the history books. One, I hate to say that I'm not surprised, like that's sort of like a gross feeling that I have, that I'm kind of numb to this idea. Like it does not feel surprising to me that this person's life was completely marginalized and sort of thrown away to the sidelines. And then, you know, obviously there's a lot of anger in there and this feeling of like, you know, this person accomplished so much and should be honored and should be celebrated. Like, what more can a person do? Really, he's so extraordinary and so unique and so amazingly, I think, important to the classical music conversation, especially that within Paris at the time. And to think that he has sort of become a footnote within that world is incredibly angering.
One day, the whole world will know me. And of course, the music will be spectacular. Bold.
You don't belong here. You're a party trick. You're a pet, playing the violin, that is all.
I feel like the erasure of Black Brilliance, the thing that it makes me feel, again, is it's just a lot of anger and just discomfort. Like, it's just, there's sort of like a helplessness there, I think. There's almost like nothing you can do. And like during this process too, after sort of learning about Joseph and writing this movie and doing the research, like sort of as you sort of uncover all these stones, there's so many other amazing people of color. There's so many amazing women. There's so many amazing other marginalized people that we just don't know about or talk about or have any idea about. And so it's really sort of an exciting investigation, I think, which again is sort of the positive of this, is that once you open your eyes to this kind of, you know, injustice or erasure, you start to sort of pick it up everywhere else, meaning that like you start to understand that so many other incredibly important, amazing, creative, unique people have been kind of, I don't know, covered up and sort of thrown by the wayside. So it's sort of an exciting idea to try to excavate these people, and I hope it's something that, you know, everyone, you know, continues to do or tries to do or aspires to do. I think that sort of looking in the past and celebrating those people help us understand our present a little bit more.
There are many aspects of our human story that remain yet to be uncovered and revealed. And there is something that's gratifying about doing that work, because it helps us to have a fuller, more rounded understanding of human experience. It helps generate empathy and a sense of unity between people from different backgrounds, and it really leads to the truth, you know. And the truth is really important. Truth is really important.
It took so long to get this movie made. I think it took from the first time that I pitched it to Searchlight and actually had a serious conversation with them about it, I think it took about 7 years before we were actually in production. I had written, I want to say 20 drafts of this script. This is the most I've ever rewritten anything in my life. Obviously the pandemic hit as well, which really shook things up and made things not easy for so many different reasons, so many different obvious reasons. And again, the fact that this story is truly extraordinary, right? Like the lead character, Joseph, this person, this character needed to be represented accurately by an actor. And so there's a lot of time spent thinking about and searching for the perfect Joseph, who we found in Kelvin Harrison Jr., who is incredible. But I think the sort of X factor for us was feeling like this person was kind of within and without. Do you know what I mean? That he was incredibly present and playful, but at the same time really contemplative and thoughtful and a little like world weary, which was nice. And to me, that just felt like the character, someone who was sort of torn between those two worlds, literally, but also sort of metaphorically in his body.
Behold, France's future. He is both angel and devil, warrior and poet, a true son of France. My best friend, master of the sword, maestro of the bow. You know him well, Joseph Bologne.
My connection to Joseph kind of stems from growing up in New Orleans, and I went to a majority white private Jewish school, which I did. I had some really enjoyable moments there, but ultimately I did feel like I was just one of one. There were probably it was a handful of us in the school, and I got in the school mostly because of the fact that I was the arts kid. I came in and I played piano and trumpet, and I would sing a little, and they were really excited to put me in all the arts programs and the brochures, and I would perform for the luncheons. I found my value and my self-worth through their validation of me through my craft. It wasn't about who I was, it wasn't about where I came from, it was celebrating my culture, but without actually wanting to know the history behind it. I never allowed myself to be an individual, I never allowed myself to have an opinion outside of, do you like me? Was that good? But as I've done these projects, I've started to, just have a little bit more self-love, a lot more self-love to be honest, and just respecting who I am and what I bring to the table.
They ask about you out there, the people. They miss your music. Enough wallowing, it is pathetic.
Seems fitting of me.
You've let these rich white people soften you. Get up. Come with me.
So the heart behind Chevalier to me is probably, this word keeps coming to mind, is liberty. The idea is hopefully France will be liberated, right? And black people will be liberated and women will be liberated. But I think the deeper idea for me is probably self-liberation. That is, I think, what the movie is about. It's Joseph's journey or his foray into, self-actualization. This is who I am, and I'm liberating myself from preconceived notions. I'm liberating myself from, what I think I should be doing and how I should be spending my time, what I think other people should be thinking about me, and do I have the courage to fully step into myself and have that be celebrated or not celebrated? Like, do you have the courage to be yourself and risk being torn down, I think, because of it? And I think how that connects maybe to the climate that we're living in now is, I think there's a lot of fear about this idea of celebration of self.
So, as a Jamaican, I grew up surrounded by the music of another musical revolutionary. And to me, Joseph Bologne, our Chevalier, is a musical revolutionary in his own time. And so the spirit of Bob Marley was with me throughout the making of this movie. In fact, every single day on the call sheet, I would make sure that there was a Bob Marley lyric at the top of the call sheet for the crew. One of the most essential messages that Bob Marley's music has shared with us all is this notion, and I'm going to quote a lyric from one of the last songs he ever recorded, a song called Redemption Song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And this is the journey, it turns out, from my point of view, the same journey that Joseph had to go on.
It has been difficult for me, I think, to be a woman in this industry. I think I spend a lot of time, especially, having really pushed for making this movie, and luckily Searchlight believed in me from the get-go, and I'm so lucky that that was the case, because I think prior to that, I had felt like people just didn't really take me seriously. I think the industry at the time was just so excited to try to typecast me and say, well, you're a woman, so you must want to write about women in their 20s because you're a woman in their 20s. And for me, that just wasn't the case. So to go to Searchlight, excited to tell a story about a man who lived in the late 1700s, and it was about fencing and opera and violins, to go into there and pitch that movie and to have them not only be super receptive but excited and supportive of this idea was a breath of fresh air. I think one of the things that helped me, at least in my mind, feel like, oh wait, I can do this, I can keep going, and there is room for me here actually, and there is space for me to just be me, gender or race aside. These are the stories I want to tell, and these are how I want to tell them. And I feel supported in doing that.
I think it's really important that we keep the pressure on and keep telling those stories of people who have contributed to our human history, our human story.
I think the power of a hidden story, or the power of sort of excavating these hidden stories is, like I said, I think it's incredibly important for us to understand who we are as people now. When we do, I think, lean into the parts of us that we're either too afraid to talk about or too ashamed to talk about, and I guess lean into those things. For me, it makes people feel less alone, and I think that once people really truly fully understand that there are people who have either gone through something similar to them, or someone who looks similar to them has gone through, you know, either amazingly tragic things or amazingly, you know, incredible things. And hopefully we're able to not only understand ourselves, but everybody else a little bit better.
What's so incredible to me about Stefani is the fact that, like, I think she heard about Chevalier when she was like 14, 16, wrote this script, brought it to Searchlight. You know, I cried. I don't cry doing scripts. No disrespect to everybody else, but I don't cry doing scripts. And I cry over and over every time I read this story. They're so gifted in Steven. I mean, he had such a vision for the movie and such a confidence. And what I appreciated is that he was like, I'm not interested in doing the thing that everyone expects me to do. I'm gonna make the movie that I wanna make. I feel really just blessed to be able to be a part of this movie that not only is very educational, but it's a fun movie to watch. With a black lead and a period piece about classical music that's giving us, and not even that, it's a real story. The elements of that, it's like, that's slim to none. Listen, it's just really profound for me to be a part of this moment, and I think it's time, and I think everybody's ready and excited. Woman King did the thing, just like Angela Bassett, and Chevalier hopefully will do the same. Damn. And I play Joseph Bologne, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges.
If you take to the stage, you will be erased. There will be no new France. You cannot topple what has been ordained by God.
Not everything is about you people.